Last time on Midas. This new Diary of a Wimpy Kid book, it's not good. Hey everyone, Midas here. It's finally that time of the year to talk about the newest Diary of a Wimpy Kid book. If you remember my previous video, or didn't just plug your ears during the first few seconds of this one, you'll recall that I did not speak positively about No Brainer. And after 8 months, my opinion hasn't changed. I still do view it as the worst Diary of a Wimpy Kid book. But of course, that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here for Hot Mess. There are two sides to how I approached this book. On the one hand, I was excited that the book was family oriented, since Hard Luck, one of my favorite books, also had that as its central premise. And with how No Brainer was, there was really nowhere to go but up. But on the other hand, No Brainer shot down the upward trajectory that the series was slowly starting to gain. This is the 4th story revolving around a vacation, and also, I would miss out on a joke calling this book a hot mess if it turns out to be good. So neither being fully optimistic nor pessimistic, I just went into the book, and to say the least, it's something. The story starts with Greg talking about his mom's side of the family, and right off the bat, I'll compliment the book. Most of the characters aren't random nobodies that appear in only this book and we'll never see again. Instead, they are members of Greg's family that we saw in Hard Luck. It's great since we already know most of these characters personality-wise, and we don't have to waste too much time with introductions. We learn that Grandma has been the leading member of the family since Meemaw passed away, and the reason is because of a special recipe of meatballs she made. For her 75th birthday, Grandma requests her daughters go to spend time with each other at an island they used to visit over the summer. So now everyone's summer plans have been thrown out the window as they're going to Ruddy Neck Island. At some point, Jeff Kenny will run out of different types of vacations Greg can go on, right? Anyway, there's some fun callbacks throughout this book. Corny's is referenced. There's a small mention of the recurring storyline where Susan returned to college. And there are a few other cool things here that remind you that this is a series and not just random stories that are told and then dispersed into the void like they never happened. One thing I was surprised by is that there are a couple of moments where Greg feels very well written, almost like classic Greg. The two best examples come from the only appearances of Rowley in this book, which, while unfortunate, provides some great moments. Greg talks about a time he went to a fancy restaurant with Rowley and his family, and he laughed loudly when Rowley ordered in French, left crumbs on the table so that employees could do their job, ordered 2 full dishes, and ate so many breadsticks that he was completely full when it finally arrived. In the other example, Greg tells Rowley that cucumber seeds are valuable, and he convinces him to trade a video game for them. This ends up not working in Greg's favor though, as Mr. Jefferson takes back the game and doesn't give back the seeds. These moments feel like classic Wimpy Kid, and I wish Greg was more like this throughout the book. Unfortunately though, that isn't always the case. And now, Greg hasn't always been the sharpest spoon in the knife drawer, but most of his dumb moments used to come from him not thinking things through or being too lazy to do something. Here, there are multiple moments where he acts in ways that feel childish. For example, Greg is apparently shown to be afraid of pirates, even though he dressed up as one in the first book. You might say this is a nitpick, but if I don't say it, no one else will because I care way too much about these minor details. I'll just highlight this moment, but things like this happen a couple times across the book. Anyway, the main 5 members of the Heffleys go on a cruise to the island and then arrive at the beach house, albeit with some difficulty. They reunite with Susan's sisters, and I guess I have to talk about this part of the story. Greg's Aunt Veronica has a pet dog that wasn't mentioned in Hard Luck, and it's used as an explanation for why she would rarely be at family events as stated in that book. Apparently, her dog unintentionally became a huge internet celebrity, and Aunt Veronica and her dog Dazzle have to constantly hide from the public eye and their tons of fans. This is dipping a bit into kind of silly territory, but it goes completely over the top when Aunt Veronica says that, and let me make this clear, Dazzle does not know that she's a dog, and she makes sure to hide reflections so that Dazzle believes she's a human. Thankfully, this is the most absurd moment in the book, but it's impressive how this book managed to create the pig from the previous books on steroids in terms of how dumb it is. I will admit though, it does have a really good punchline where Greg says that he would immediately make a family vlog channel in the future when he has kids, and that just sounds like the most Greg thing ever. One new thing we learn about Susan and her family is that she doesn't have the best relationship with her older sister Keiki. Not only that, but Keiki also treats Frank very poorly. Later that night, there's not a bunch of room to sleep, so Roderick sleeps soundly in the crib. This isn't super important or anything, but I wanted to show because it's very in character with how previous books have shown Roderick's sleeping abilities. The next day, the whole family heads to the beach, and quite a bit of wacky shenanigans ensue. At one point, Greg gets some water from a cooler they brought, but the cooler had a kite attached to it, so now the cooler is starting to fly away. Greg tries to get it back, but ends up landing in an area inhabited by an endangered species. so he decides it might be a better idea to just give up. Of course, this wouldn't be a classic Wimpy Kid vacation story without some problems arising. Everyone is given a scheduled time to use the bathroom since there's so many of them in a small house. Susan and her sisters are constantly bickering with each other, and then an actual neat surprise happens. Uncle Gary shows up at their front door after failing to find a job on the island. He then just kind of attaches himself to the vacation, even though he's from Frank's side of the family. Also, I just wanted to pay attention to this line I found in the book. Greg says that, if there's a juicy scandal in my family, everyone's done a good job keeping it under wraps. Gregorius. Do you not remember Meemaw's wedding ring and that whole situation that almost tore the family apart? The wedding ring, which, by the way, Greg, you hid in Susan's closet? I don't know, I guess the wedding ring got de-atomized the moment that book ended. Anyway, in a scene that reminds me of a moment in the long haul, the Hefleys all talk about the different ways they want to spend the day. They're stuck between golfing and going to a lighthouse, and Roger breaks a tie when Susan pays him to vote for the lighthouse. They head to the lighthouse, and I do find it funny how Susan loudly celebrates getting the last tickets while being right behind another family that was waiting to get theirs. There's a ton of traffic going up the stairs, so by the time they get to the top, Greg refuses to go back down, and he ends up being carried down. The next day, the family decides to play some board games, and Frank gets excited when he finds the hit game, Monopoly on Wish. Susan doesn't want to play the game since she says it teaches people to be greedy, but nobody else sides with her. Everyone's having a really good time, besides Frank who goes bankrupt first, and maybe also Susan, who picks up the table so that the board game falls into the trash. The next day, Greg is given Susan's phone, goes outside, and decides to do something he's never done before. If you ignore that one movie that came out 13 years ago, Greg decides to become famous on YouTube. Greg tries to think up a gimmick for what he can do on the channel, and he decides to do an ice cream reviews where he only rates them based on one lick. His first video gains no traction, relatable, and Greg decides that the best way to get big fast is to change his profile picture to a photo of himself that also includes Dazzle. After that, Greg and the other kids have to make food while the parents go shopping. It goes exactly as you would expect, so now they have to eat at a restaurant. They end up going to a restaurant called Palazzo Pomodoro, which Grandma apparently hates. Things then turn to a huge mess. A hot one, if you will. The family has to wait for a spot, but then they steal another family's reservation with absolutely zero remorse. Uncle Gary, in classic Uncle Gary fashion, starts saying way too much and reveals that Keiki hates Susan and Frank so much because Susan stole Frank from her. Everyone starts eating, trying to ease the awkwardness, but things take a turn, or I guess at this point they continue going south as everyone realizes they taste like Grandma's meatballs. They go to argue with the restaurant staff, and during that time, the family who sees they stall return and a fight breaks out. The police show up and they send only the Hefleys to the police station when they hear their last name. And this leads to another moment in the book I enjoyed. They found the cooler Greg lost earlier, and they are super concerned with what's written on the top of it. Earlier on in the book, Greg wrote, "Human organs keep refrigerated on the cooler so that people wouldn't try to steal anything from it." When they realize there are no human organs, the Hefleys are let go, but not before getting a family picture for their vacation. It's the final day of the vacation, and Greg realizes that there are a bunch of people at their front door. This is because people found his channel, and since Dazzle was in the picture, they quickly found out where they were. And one thing I wanted to note, I've been calling this family the Hefleys, but I think they technically aren't. The Hefleys are Frank's side of the family, but there's really nothing else to call them since we don't even know Susan's maiden name. Anyway, the Hefleys leave through the back of the house, and Susan decides that they should visit Grandma, since the whole reason they did this trip is that's what Grandma wanted them to do for her 75th birthday. And today was the day. Grandma's now living at an assisted living center, but Grandma wasn't picking up the phone, so they weren't allowed in. The Hefleys sneak through the back door, and when they enter Grandma's apartment, they're shocked to find her dead. No, I'm just kidding. She's holding a party. It turns out the only reason Grandma wanted the others to go on vacation was so that she didn't have to deal with them arguing with each other. The family helps to clean up when Greg accidentally finds something in a trash bag, and it's the meatballs from Palazzo Pomodoro, meaning that Grandma was lying about making her own recipe this whole time. Grandma finds Greg, and Greg decides that if he ever wants to become head of the family, it would be his best interest to keep this a secret between them. Man, if there is one word that can accurately describe how I feel about this book, it's conflicted. Is it worse a no-brainer? No. As I stated, the reuse of characters that appeared in other books, especially Hard Luck, is great, but Greg is a very odd character in this book. Sometimes he's just along for the ride, not contributing much, like a book such as The Getaway or The Deep End. Sometimes he feels childish considering the age he's supposed to be, like in parts of Wrecking Ball. But there are some moments here where Greg acts in ways that I feel we haven't seen in a very long time. There's no point where it gets better or worse across the book either. His writing feels rather inconsistent across the span of the story. Yes, this is a vacation story, and some wacky hijinks do occur, but luckily, Besides the whole Dazzle storyline, there's not that much insanity that happens during this book. This is just a side tangent, but there's really no other video I'll be able to talk about this. One problem I will note with the modern Wimpy Kid series in general is that it sometimes feels like these stories are maybe a bit too cohesive. I know that sounds weird, but let me explain. The first journal felt like a diary, and while future books did a better job of creating a more consistent underlying narrative throughout the book, there are still many moments where Gray would just do some other random thing because he felt like a normal person and not a character going through a plot diagram. But starting with Long Haul and becoming very prevalent in later books, there are far more cases of stories with a definitive progression where we can't see Greg do other things besides what's relevant to the main plot. I'm gonna be honest, there's not much else I have to say about this book. I think it's fine, it's certainly got some problems, but there are some glimmers of hope for the series here. When it comes to ranking this book, I can't really see any higher than Diaper Overload or Big Shot. I think those two books have consistently better characterization and plots. But now, there is something I need to address regarding a previous book. Quite a while ago, I ranked every Wimpy Kid book and put The Meltdown in D tier. While I think this book is better than The Meltdown, I could see Hot Mess in the second to last spot of C tier, and The Meltdown moved from D to the bottom of C. While I definitely still have issues with The Meltdown, I've started to realize some more of the positive qualities of the book after reading Hot Mess. I definitely think by this point that it's better than The Getaway and more fulfilling than Wrecking Ball. Anyway, what was I talking about again? Oh yeah, Hot Mess. This book was certainly a hot mess because it couldn't even decide if it was fully good or fully bad. It was just alright. Now, I'm not exactly going bananas waiting for the next Diary of a Wimpy Kid book, but my disappointment is measurable and my day has not been ruined. I'm going to buy whatever book comes out next year, and hopefully the upward trend brought back with this book keeps going, and the next entry is something good, and who knows, maybe even great. I hope y'all enjoyed today's video. If you did, check out some other content, and if you really did, subscribe. That's good for now, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.